Hi guys, Tuga here with a new video, and this video will be talking about TBC and I would say the top 10 class changes I would implement towards the classes for TBC. As you may know, with Cataclysm, Miss Pandaria, we even saying Wrath, they did a lot of the class changes, although it was very minimal. In Mob, it was actually quite big. And I feel like they would do the same for TBC. I would have preferred it also to be able to do that for Classic Anniversary, but I guess they will wait for Classic Plus to do that. But in TBC, I expect changes. I think a lot of the specs, or at least a lot of the classes, are desirable for raids, but not every single spec is that desirable for a reason or another, obviously. And I want to start, for example, with Rogue to give you an example on what changes I would do. The changes could do only PvE, but we could also say, look, PvP it can also be okay to have those changes because it's not like drastic changes that makes it vastly different for PvP. But here we go. So for rogues, the main raiding spec would be combat, and you will most likely go for improved exposed armor because that would be your task to get your improved exposed armor, and it would make for huge damage for hunters, huge damage for warriors, obviously for yourself as well as a rogue, and it is like super important to have. But it would be nice that Assassination Rogue also gets a bit of love. Now, combat will probably be and stay the best, but at least you would maybe have one Assassination Rogue in your raid to be able to give those daggers that are just dropping and nobody really rolls on it. So the first few changes I would do is, for example, for leveling already, would be Mutilate being able to be used at any position. Or you could make it positional and it gives you more damage, but if it's not on the position that you are, for example, if you're in front of the mob and the mob is looking at you, you would do a bit less damage, but at least you will be able to cast Mutilate. That would be a better version than your Sinister Strike, or it would be more worth to do Mutilate over Backstab. That would be the first change I would do. It's not drastically like that drastic, I would say, but it is for sure going to help all of the dagger rogues to have a home, and a lot of the daggers that are going to be dropping to be at least have some desired spec to go to. Now you have that. Obviously, you have poisons, and the issue with poisons is that they override Wind Fury, so you don't get any Wind Fury procs if you have like a main hand poison. What I would do is that you could have both. So you have both your weapon poison and also the procs from Wind Fury. That would help immensely and also make for better DPS. But also you're a rogue and you're assassination, and you should be able to be playing with poisons because that's tree. The tree has a lot of stuff that is going to improve on poison damage, and you should be able to have like enjoyment playing around your envenom and your poisons doing more damage. Now poisons, they really are very bad at scaling, and as you may know, it doesn't scale. It's only like ranks and that's it. What would be good is that it scales with attack power. It shouldn't be like that drastic, the amount of like scaling. It shouldn't like do top damage, but it should be definitely do more damage than it does right now to make it worth to play assassination. So I would put a scaling on like the poisons, and that would help immensely the spec. It would make also for easier access to improved exposed armor. You don't need to go crazy, and you might even go for a hybrid spec where you don't play with Mutilate, you play with Backstab, and you go for Hemorrhage. You can go like this and then like that, maybe. I don't know. There's a few things that you can do to play around. Most likely, you're going to play like you're going to play 41 points into Mutilate into like dual wield specialization because it just improves more damage on your Mutilate. That's obviously the normal route you would go for if you're going for assassination. But it would be nice to have those changes because then you have a bit more flexibility between sword combat rogues and dagger assassination rogues. It would make for way more desirable gearing process, and if there are daggers that are dropping, you would not hesitate to get an assassination rogue on your team, on your raid, because then at least you have some value that goes to that. So that's one idea I have. Now let's talk about let's start about warrior. Why not? I would personally now. It's a bit tricky because if you're changing it in PvE, most likely it's going to go into PvP as well. But I would like to see a change towards more strike to be able to have a bit of attack power scaling. Now, it's crazy, I know. If you're talking about PvP, Arms Warrior is it. But if you have some attack power scaling, you would actually be able to play Arms Warrior and be scaling to the point where it's not going to be overtaking Fury, but it's going to be very close to it, because then the more gear you have, the more damage you're going to do. But as you may know, the issue with like Classic and TBC, more strike is only scaling with your weapon, but at one point the weapon stops scaling because you don't have like infinite scaling on weapon. While attack power is something you can infinitely scale, or you have potions, or you have buffs, or what. Again, you can have more attack power than actually having your weapon being good. So having a bit of scaling, just a bit, don't need to be too much, can help with your PvE performances as Arms Warrior. That's one of the changes I would do. Maybe Rend have way better scaling as well. I feel like Rend does no damage still in TBC. It doesn't need to be crazy like attack power scaling, but it could be something. So you could actually have some utility behind your Rend. Obviously, you have Blood Frenzy, which if you have kebab spec, it is always going to be very useful. It feels like you're playing like a super utility warrior instead of like doing your damage yourself. Deep wounds, you will always have it active anyways, because at one point you're going to have enough crit to like, again, not need to do rend. But it would be nice to have rend be useful, because you have such a talent that gives 75% increased damage on rend, but still the damage is really like not noticeable. So I would like to do something like that as a change. What else could you change? I would personally put improved slam on arms tree, but that's like a very big change. I don't know if they're going to be able to do so, but like having improved slam on the arms tree make it way easier to like get to that point, and have like a slam build going on for arms, while Fury has way more of the cleave, whirlwind, bloodthirst build that could be always going to be the deep Fury thing, right? Would be nice to see that. I don't know if it's going to ever go to that point. In PvP, improved slam is actually very good, because if you're not playing like endless rage, you can go for improved slam and maybe even weapon mastery. So you don't need to have like a disarm enchant. You can do that if you want to. But like in PvE, I would like to see slam maybe in the arms tree. Again, it would change for PvP as well, but it would help immensely in how warriors actually are feeling on the arms tree. Now that's like low priority. I think Fury is fine. It does scale very well, so there's not many changes I could do. I like on top of my head, I don't know how many changes you could do on Warrior without making it broken. You don't need to make it broken, just make it a bit better for the other specs. Talking about Warlocks, one big change I would do for TBC, and that would be the same for Shadow Priest, is that your dots can crit. You don't need to do that for every single spec. Like for example, boomies. I don't know if you want to do that. I don't know if you want to have like flame shock crit for shamans, but it would be nice to have like affliction and shadow priest to be able to crit their dots, so they can actually scale way better. It will not make them the best specs either, because destruction is still going to be the go-to spec, um, but it would be a huge advance in how they scale, because the issue with shadow priest, for example, is that their dots don't crit. So obviously the only way to scale as a shadow priest is with spell power, but as you may know, there is no real like scalability behind spell power compared to like spell power and crit. For example, arcane mages, fire mages, destruction warlocks. Who am I forgetting? I'll guess Boomy. Why not? They scale way better with crit. While affliction warlock, they don't do like ridiculously bad DPS. That's not really what's happening, but they have some utility with a shadow embrace. But imagine if they can actually crit their dots with like unstable affliction, corruption, and agony. That would be doing immense amount of damage, possibly that is enough to like shape up the game, and it would help that if you put it very high, like very low on the tree. Now it's a big change, I know. I don't know if they're going to ever do that, but if you put the you can crit next to the unstable affliction, it means that you cannot go SL and crit stuff in PvP. So it's not going to be drastically changing anything, but in PvP you will see way more unstable affliction warlocks, UA warlocks, without like being super tanky. They're going to be able to be killed, obviously, but they will be able to do more damage, and it will be more fun to play. It would be nice to have that on the affliction, unstable affliction tree. So the affliction warlock tree, where next to unstable affliction you have like can crit, corruption, unstable affliction, and siphon life and agony, for example, would be nice. And then for the shadow priest, for example, I would like to have that as well next to Vampiric Touch, can crit their dots, which again is something that they changed in Wrath, which made them way better, way more scalable, and way more desirable. Another change I would do, for example, for the Demonology tree is that the Felguard maybe is a bit more stronger. I'm talking about AoE protection, so you don't really lose your Felguard on the first AoE attempts. Same for the other pets, really. I think protect the AoE stuff like they do for Wrath, so you have somewhat of a pet at the end of the battle, at the start of the battle, at the middle of the battle. Yes, you can maybe have some sort of a protection, like you have to do something to protect it, maybe like put a self buff on the Felguard every 10 seconds or whatever. I don't know. You can change. You can find a way to make it work, but it would be nice to have it as a possibility to make it work. So you can maybe play Demonology Walk even in raids or dungeons without it like feeling stupid because you lose your pets every single time. I would say the same for like hunters, but for now, warlocks, I think they lose their pets on a whim, and they don't really like do anything with their pets, basically, because you go for demonic sacrifice. If you're raiding, I think you're sacrificing your succubus and you gain like maximum value, so you don't go for Shadow Fury in raids. Um, but it would be nice for PvE. It would also be nice for PvP because really, like Felguard, it just dies really quickly to anything, really. So I don't know. I would like to see that change. Why not? Now let's talk about like priest, because I already talked it a bit about, but like mainly the problem I have is that it doesn't really scale. Mind Flay doesn't crit. Shadow Word Pain doesn't crit. Your Vampiric Touch actually doesn't do too much damage by itself. It just is like a mana battery and that's it. If you want to make it a bit more scalable, it's not going to break the meters either. It's not going to make it like top of the meters in like any logs, but at least when you get crit on your gear, it's not completely wasted. Obviously, it is not really completely wasted, especially in PvP. If you crit a Mind Blast or a Shadow Word Death, it actually is impactful. But like not having your Shadow Word Pain and your Mind Flay and your Vampiric Touch not crit feels incredibly bad. It would be nice to have that. That's a change that they did for Wrath, which I find it one of the best changes they did, which is like being able to crit on your dots, and that would help immensely how it scales. It's not going to like directly make it in competition with a warlock because obviously the scaling is not on the same level, but it would be definitely way more worth to have a shadow priest also for the damage and not only for the mana. And obviously if you crit your dots, you're going to regain more mana, so it's going to help your whole raid and your whole party in general. I would maybe give Vampiric Touch also a raid-wide thing, but that's like maybe too much of a change because that's a system change where they have to do it for every single class. But it would be nice to have like Vampiric Touch crit, Shadow Word Pain crit, Mind Fade crit, because it helps out immensely. And it's not like you have any real stats like haste and whatnot. Like that's something that doesn't really gets introduced that soon in the expansions. And if you want to make like TBC a bit different from the first time around, I feel like that's one of the changes they could do, which is going to impact a lot of stuff. Like crit is impactful. Like it's not going to be a small change, but it's not going to make like things broken either. So just do that. Shaman. Now, I'm going to be truthful. I think the only changes that you could do for Shaman to help the raids is to make a lot of stuff raid wide. Now, it doesn't like take away the amount of Shamans you need per raid, because even if you put the totems raid wide, you still need like a lot of totems to make it work. Which again, you can maybe, yeah. I mean, you could make it work with a bit less shamans, but I think the ideal would be always to have 3 or 4 shamans. Even if you put bloodlust on a raid wide thing, or you put like again the totems raid wide as well. I still think that would be a great change to start with. What else could you change? I think elemental shaman, they don't scale very well. Now it's very hard to know what makes it not scale that well, because it does drop off very quickly. They have the same problem as Boomy. I guess it's because of the dot like not critting, but I don't feel like Flame Shock is that big of a deal. Like I don't think it does enough damage to warrant like such a change. Um, I'm really thinking what could they do to change shamans like damage wise. I don't think they can do too much without breaking the game. I would definitely make like totems raid wide or bloodlust. Like you could do one or the other. Um, with like a sated thing that would like make the whole meta different. But having the sated debuff would change a lot of stuff towards like how it works. For arenas again, like bloodlust works. Do you want to remove it or not? That's like a personal question. But yeah, I think the first change I would do is raid wide bloodlust with sated, and then I would maybe do raid wide totems. Although I think raid wide totems, the truth is, doesn't change too much on the amount of shamans you bring. So I don't know, but we'll see. I think right now that would be the best next change you could do to make it a bit more undesirable. Is not the thing, but like I would say less stressful for the raids to have the amount of shamans they want to like every single time swap out a shaman in their party to keep on the bloodlust. That is kind of ridiculous. It should be definitely have a sated debuff throughout the raid, and everyone gets the bloodlust, and that's it. You only have one bloodlust per fight. That should be the norm, in my opinion. Make it for better quality gameplay, in my opinion. Now we did talk about warrior, warlock, shaman, rogue, shadow priest. We can talk about druid. Druid is one of my fan favorite classes in the game, especially for classic. I don't really like retail druid, but like druid in classic, he's always the one I'm leveling. Although I always regret at the end because classic druid is just classic druid. The stigma is very real, and then TBC druid gets a lot of like quality of life changes, and for example, um, you don't have MCP farms anymore. That's very big. Um, but you still have like the wolf heads, so it kind of sucks still. I would remove that or make it an enchant and put it as a talent. Why not? I think that would be the best thing to do is by putting it and baking it into Furor. That's how I would do. I would first change I would do, in my opinion, is Feral Druid. It should scale a bit better on dots. I feel like Rake and Rip still don't scale very well. I feel like um, the damage is not on par with what it could be, and it is really a C tier DPS spec. Obviously, the strength of Feral Druid is especially being a tank, so I'm not going to change too much on that. The AoE capacities of Feral Druid is still pretty null. Like until Wrath, like in Wrath it becomes like crazy, but in TBC it is like really not that great. I don't know if you want to add a AoE ability or AoE capacity with a lot of scaling. That's like the main question really. But the one thing I would change is like Rake and Rip to actually do damage. Um, I feel like the damage is still very low, even if you have Mangle that improves the damage. It's still not enough. And maybe make it a bit more sexy to have a Feral Druid. like cat form. I feel like right now you could even just say no, we don't need a feral druid, we just need a feral tank, and that's it. Um, and that kind of sucks. Well, again, we come from classic, and it just is like a stigma that just keeps on going. Boomy, you still go So my first change would do, like, I don't know, man. It's very hard because you don't have Eclipse, and once you have Eclipse, you regain mana, especially in Cataclysm and onwards. You regain mana every time you're going to do an Eclipse. Here the issue is you don't regenerate mana unless you are hit. So I guess my guess is that it should have some sort of a regen of mana based on your spell hit. That would help on your Moonking form. I don't know. They could maybe put a mana regen on Force of Nature, which is every 3 minutes you get like some sort of mana back. That could help. But realistically, you still get and the damage is not impressive enough as well because your dots don't crit as well. So the scaling is like very limited on dots. You have your Moonfire, your Insect Swarm, but really it's not that impactful. You would get maybe a bounce rate to get improved Fairy Fire. The truth is that at one point people are going to take Resto Druids that are like going into improved Fairy Fire. It's obviously like less healing, but it's still a healer. You can just go for the lower end, not really lower end, the mid end of the tree, and you can go Dream State, which gives you more mana on return as well. You would get improved Fairy Fire as well, and that's it. Then you're going to lose Swift Mend. Who cares? I still think your healing is still good. It's not going to be like top parser for healing, and who cares about top parsing as a healer anyways. But it would help immensely with the amount of utility you would have. And that's why Boomy is not really the requirement these days. The 5% increased spell critical chance is nice. But it's not raid wide first and foremost. I think if it was raid wide, you would have way more flexibility in having a Moonkin bounce druid inside of your raid. But since it's party wide, like where do you fit a balanced druid without losing DPS, without losing a healer maybe? So I would like change it to maybe make it raid wide and regain mana somehow, some way. Again, Eclipse doesn't exist, so it's very hard to like imagine a way to get mana back. But maybe make it like a bit more efficient to cast spells. That would help already maybe a few more DPS down the line. That's what I see. Again, if you have suggestions for balance rate, let me know. I think it's one of the specs that are the hardest to balance, to not make it broken. And I don't want it to be like an infinite mana thing, because that's like, again, every spec has problems with that. But it would be nice to have like something that is like unique to druids. I think Resto Druid is fine, so it's very hard to change anything. Maybe make Omen Clarity able to proc on spells. That would help. That would help. I think if you put Omen of Clarity able to be procs on spells, that would definitely help. So just do that maybe. Like they did on SOD, just put it in also in TBC. Now hunters, there's not much that you can change to make it better, because I feel like it's one of the best classes in the game. You have two specs that you can have in the raid. You have the survival hunter spec and you have the beast mastery spec, which is the pumper spec, and the survival spec is also a pumper spec but happens to have exposed on weakness, which helps immensely with the amount of DPS you would have raid wide. I would personally, it's tough. It's really tough. But I would personally change nothing. One of the changes I could do, I don't know, it's difficult. I don't know if there is really a change I could do without it making busted. So I will change nothing on the hunter side. If you would like to see a change, let me know. But try to keep in mind that we are not trying to make the specs OP. We're trying to make it a bit better to be more desirable in raids and your parties. I feel like hunter is one of the most desirable classes in the game anyways, although you have plenty of hunters, so you will still have competition. It's a spec that you can actually like stack. So it's something that you cannot say for every single spec or class. Mage. I would change Frost Mage, but again, you make Frost Mage very busted, and like in PvP, how does it work? Do you put a modifier like does not affect PvP? Maybe. I would like to have changes that are like game wide and not only PvE wide. But let's think a bit about it, right? I think for Fire Mage, it scales. I think just Arcane is better, but it does scale with crit. If you have crit, but like more crit, it becomes way more interesting because of Ignite and whatnot. For Frost, I think the main issue is Shatter. You don't really have a lot of utility with Shatter because you cannot really Nova like bosses. So one thing they could do is obviously it's very tough, but obviously put like Fingers of Frost in the game. It's but again, if you have it in PvP, it just makes it for really incredible toxic gameplay. So that kind of sucks. I don't know. It feels like I don't want to change too much on Mage because I feel like they have Arcane and they even have Fire. And yes, Frost is like the PvP spec, so you don't need to change too much. But I would say the first change I would do is I would not change it. Like Fingers of Frost is like I really despise mages in PvP already, so I don't want to despise it even more. I wouldn't change nothing. If you want to change something for mages, let me know. I don't know what you could do to change it, but without making it busted. I'm not like saying nerfed classes as well, so for now, mages, no changes. For Paladin, what changes I would do? I think Shokarin should be a possibility to maybe be an option, but again, do you want to have a holy like a healing spec being good in DPS? I don't know. Reckoning is like definitely not on the same level as Classic, anyways. You have Crusader Strike. I think one of the things that you could do is maybe nerf the mana cost on Crusader Strike. That's one of the changes you could do, maybe. Um, what else could you change? Maybe some sort of AoE stuff on like Seal of Command, maybe like they did on Wrath. I'm thinking like maybe raid wide auras, but I think that's too much. I think that's too like you don't want to like ruin a few things that TBC makes it great. You seal twisting, and I would not change it. I would not like again. I would not like put it away for sure. I think paladins are actually fine. I don't know if there is much you can change. I guess maybe protection paladin, make Avenger's Shield not castable, just like instant would be a good quality of life change. What else could you change? I don't know. I feel like there's not much you can change. Um, Maybe Holy Shield being a bit less clunky. I don't know. I feel like right now it is one of the better classes in TBC. Obviously, it takes work for seal twisting to work, but again, if you have seal twisting and you have a Wind Fury proc, you can literally do like insane amount of damage and aggro. And I personally kind of like how it is. A lot of people do like TBC Paladin. I personally feel a bit clunky with it, but that's my opinion. I think it's because like I played too much of Wrath Paladin, where it is really dumbed down compared to TBC, where it comes to how you deal damage. Um, so my opinion on it is kind of like Wrath based. While a lot of the people that do like Paladin, they like TBC Paladin. So I would not change too much on that. But anyways, this is kind of the video I wanted to make. I did like all the changes towards like the first end of the video, and then at the end, like I didn't change too much on like I didn't change anything to Hunter, and didn't change anything to Mage, didn't think any changes could do for Paladin. It's very DPS heavy, I know, because again, healer, I don't really play healer in raids or in dungeons, so I don't really know what change you could do. Maybe Lightwell being a bit less useless, because I feel like it's a useless spell, maybe. I don't know. For now, I'm happy with the changes I have proposed. Let me know in the comment section below what changes you could do to classes to not make it busted, but to make it more desirable. I think my favorite change you could do is make dots crit. The same for rogue poisons actually. Like it should be also be able to crit, even rend and deep wounds. Why not? I think like just dots critting is making the game a bit more fun, to a stats value where your crit is not wasted, but also like it. The more popping crit numbers you have, the more interesting it becomes, kind of in my head, especially since Wrath does that very well. I think TBC could learn like that few thing about like Wrath. You don't need to make TBC Wrath, but I feel like that's one of the changes that could make the specs just way better in general without it making it broken. But anyways, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.